Hello, hello, hello! Thank you, Ferl, for that remarkable introduction on the Philippine Revolution. Now, let's kick things off with where it all began, an uprising that created a spark in the consciousness of the Filipinos under the Spanish rule to strive for independence, the Cavite Mutiny. Whoa! So, we will be discussing the background and factual truths of the uprising. Then, we will be studying the two narratives or perspectives of the Cavite Mutiny, the Spanish and the Filipino version. And lastly, we will be discussing what was the aftermath of the mutiny. Things like what happened to those who participated in the uprising and how does it fit into the bigger picture of the Philippine Revolution. Before we get started, let me refresh the definition of the word mutiny. Mutiny means to revolt against lawful authority with or without armed resistance, especially in the army or navy. It can also be a verb, which means to refuse to obey the orders of a person in authority. So we could infer that the Cavite Mutiny were started by Filipino military personnel. But why? We will find out soon enough. For the first part, we will be discussing what happened in the night of the mutiny. No biased perspectives, just facts. In January 20, 1872, around 200 Filipinos started the revolt at Fort San Felipe in Cavite. Fort San Felipe was a Spanish arsenal, so Filipino soldiers and workers worked there to manufacture weapons, such as cannons, firearms, and bullets. Having experience in the military, they only killed Spanish soldiers on sight, but despite their efforts, they were quickly neutralized by Spanish troops. Filipinos were killed and some of them were exiled or even executed after the uprising. The mutiny in Cavite has failed. But despite the outcome, it was a major factor in the awakening of nationalism among Filipinos. It created a series of events that led to the formation of the Philippine Revolution. Knowing what happened in the Cavite Mutiny, how did our colonizers react to it? What did they have to say? We'll soon dwell on some of the major Spanish accounts of the mutiny. We'll start with the major players of this period. Rafael Izquierdo was the Governor General of the Philippines at the time. The position of Governor General is equivalent to being the President of the Republic of the Philippines. He is remembered for employing an iron fist rule and opposition against reformist and nationalistic progress made at the time. This is an excerpt from his official report regarding the Cavite Mutiny. It has not been clearly determined if they plan to establish a monarchy or a republic, because the Indios have no word in their language to describe this form of government, whose head in Filipino would be called hari. But it turns out that they would place at the head of the government a priest, that the head selected would be Jose Burgos or Jacinto Zamora. There. But according from Izquierdo's report, the native clergy also gained supporters by giving Filipinos promises of employment, wealth, and ranks in the army, and the assurance that they will not fail because they had God's support. That all of the efforts made to overthrow the Spanish rule was according to God's will. This claim was also supported by Jose Montero Vidal, a Spanish historian. Taken from his account of the mutiny, he said that the idea of attaining their independence, it was towards this goal that they started to work with the powerful assistance of a certain section of the native clergy. His account supported the Governor General's claim, and it centered on how the mutiny was an attempt to overthrow the Spanish government in the Philippines, and the native clergy were somehow involved with the rebels. Later on, his account on the event was questioned and was criticized for being incredibly biased. Another point that they made was that the mutiny was a response to Governor Rafael Izquierdo's abolishment of privileges enjoyed by artisanal workers, such as being exempted from paying taxes or tribute on payday, and forced labor, or poloy servicios. This somehow escalated the somehow sudden uprising into a premeditated incident, and that the Filipino soldiers, leaders, lawyers, and residents of Manila and Cavite were conspiring to overthrow the Spanish government. Another point made in the Spanish accounts is how the revolution quickly died down when Manileños, who were expected to rendezvous with the Caviteños, did not arrive at the night of the incident in Fort San Felipe, which is located at the shores of Manila Bay. The cause of the supposed delay in reinforcements? There was a celebration of the Feast of Loreto in the district of Sampaloc at the time. There were gatherings and fireworks displays to celebrate the event. These firework displays were misinterpreted by the Caviteños as a signal to commence with the attack, along with the Filipino soldiers in Manila. The attack on the Spanish artillery was premature and without any reinforcements. They were quickly dealt with. Sargento La Madrid, the leader of the mutiny, was killed, and the remaining troops were sentenced to death or were forced to do hard labor. Now, let's take a dive into the Filipino accounts of the mutiny, and hopefully, we would gain a new perspective and be able to compare it with the Spanish accounts. Dr. Trinidad Hermenegildo Pardo de Tavera was a Filipino scholar and researcher. Sometime after the mutiny, he decided to research on the incident and give another look on the Cavite Mutiny, but from the eyes of a Filipino. He stated that the central Spanish government was planning to deprive the friars of all the powers of intervention in their colonies. This meant being harder to manage their colonies and being prone to being overthrown by uprisings and nationalistic movements. These friars feared that their power in the colony would soon be a complete thing of the past. So in response to this, Izquierdo employed a strict iron fist rule in order to regain some of the lost control of the colony. And according to Tavera, this made the Filipinos dissatisfied with his draconian policies, such as the removal of privileges, discussed a while ago, enjoyed by Filipino workers and soldiers who were working at the Spanish artillery in Fort San Felipe. This was backed up by Edmond Plachou, a French writer, and his account stating that the arrival in Manila of General Escuerdo put a sudden end to all dreams of reforms. We can see how the Filipino accounts describe the mutiny as an incident that was bound to happen due to the will of the Filipinos to end such policies implemented by Izquierdo that repressed the rights and privileges of the Filipinos. And now we have come to the aftermath and conclusion of the mutiny. We will be discussing the main points that happened after the uprising. After learning of what happened in Fort San Felipe, the Spanish friars used the incident as a part of a larger conspiracy to cement their dominance, that they could suppress and control the Filipinos no matter how prepared or abrupt our plans in overthrowing the Spanish government are. They showed feats of dominance, such as exiling those who participated in the mutiny and organizing public executions. Many people who were unaware of their supposed involvement with the revolution were executed, like the Gomburza. We can see now how the Cavite Mutiny set off a chain of events that would eventually lead to our independence from the foreign rule. Thank you for listening. I will be giving this stage to Carl and his report on the three Filipino martyr priests, the Gomburza.